You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, everybody. Welcome to the Cyber Business Uplift series. My name's Charlton, and I'd like to firstly say that while we're meeting virtually, we continue to acknowledge the traditional custodians that have for thousands of years walked upon and cared for the lands upon which we are all individually located today. We also acknowledge the continued deep spiritual attachment and relationship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to this country and commit ourselves to the ongoing journey of reconciliation. So thank you for joining us for our second session of the Cyber Business Uplift series. I'm Charlton from Western Sydney Community Forum, and in this session today, we'll be looking into online scams, what your organization needs to know and what to do about them. And just to let you know a bit about our series. So we've partnered with the New South Wales Innovation Node to bring about the series and to support you through, what's going on, especially being thrown into the deep end because of the coronavirus pandemic. And, and at the same time, we're all kind of forced to play catch up. So just a few bits of housekeeping. For your toilets, they're located with wherever your toilets are located. Your emergency exits are, my one's right behind me. But just where. But if in any case, if you may have emergency. Please do leave. It's completely fine. And same goes with getting refreshments and whatnot. So without further ado, before we started, you may have noticed the code on the screen asking everybody to hop on to menti.com. Basically, this is just to gauge where you're sitting at and your understanding of what where you're sitting in terms of confidence levels in identifying online scams. So if everybody can quickly just hop on to menti.com with the code 279629, and just it's just one short, simple question about your confidence levels. This will kind of gauge us of where we're at, and then we'll probably do one after the session just to see where we're going to see if there's been any changes. So what I'll probably do now, I might hand over to Dr. Stephenie Andal, the Senior Business Development Manager for New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. Stephenie, are you there?
I am. I just can't get my video going. Thanks a lot, Charlton. There we go. Beautiful. Thanks a lot, Charlton. Thanks for that great intro. As he mentioned, my name is Stephenie Andal, and I manage the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. And we're really thrilled to be here today with everybody talking about a topic which is very near and dear to our hearts. And I think with everything that's going on with COVID and everybody working from home, there is a lot of great timing around this for Ty and Damien to be talking about online scams today. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us. We are running this session every single week for the next couple of weeks. So if you find today's session useful, please feel free to join us next Thursday from 12 to 1 and then the following one after that. Just very quickly, our organization is responsible to build awareness of cybersecurity capability and understanding around cyber hygiene and different topics for New South Wales and Australia. So we have partnered with Western Sydney Community Forum to be talking to people in Western Sydney today about some of these topics. Today's, which is certainly around online scams. And we're really thrilled to be joined today by our speakers, which are Ty Miller and Damien Harvey from Threat Intelligence. And I won't go on and on about Damien and Ty, but their company is a Sydney-based cybersecurity company, so a local company that our organization works with. And they're really, I don't want to say too much, but I think they're really rising superstars in the Australian cybersecurity sector. And they're doing a lot of really fantastic work when it comes to different cybersecurity services such as penetration testing, intelligence around cyber threats, and then they've got a really cool platform that they've developed that is automating a lot of the concerns around cybersecurity, which is fantastic. Ty, who's going to be speaking, and then Damien after. Ty's really a proper legend in the cybersecurity sector, and he's taught for numbers of years at Black Hat USA. And I don't know if there's anybody on today who's aware of Black Hat, but it really is kind of the conference globally for cybersecurity professionals, organizations, and governments around the globe. So we're really chuffed to have him sharing his knowledge today in relation to this topic. And Damien's also going to be joining us. I'm not sure sure who's going to be sharing, but Damien is on the line and he works very closely with Ty and does some fantastic work as well. So without further ado, I'd like to thank them preemptively for giving up their time today, and I'm really looking forward to a fantastic session. And before I do that, I'd really like to encourage everybody on the line. We've got a small group today. Please don't be shy about raising any questions throughout the session, and after, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So with that, I'll pass it over to Damien and Ty.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great introduction as always. Thank you. So we're going to be talking about online scams today. And just a bit of background. So Steph gave us a bit of an introduction, but I'm Ty Miller. I'm the Managing Director of Threat Intelligence. We're a specialist security company based in Sydney, Australia. We also operate all around Australia and internationally. And one of our key platforms is called the Evolved Security Automation Cloud, which helps organizations to automate their cybersecurity, including one of the features that I'll demonstrate during this, which is the compromised account monitoring. As Stephanie said, we've been very heavily involved in Black Hat for the last 10 years. So we'll actually be running our 10th year of our training courses over in the US. So we're the only company in Australia who actually gets invited to go and run training over at Black Hat. So we train up the likes of the FBI, US Department of Defense, US military, international government agencies, and all the big technology and security companies. So to jump straight into the presentation, basically security can easily fail ultimately because of people. So the weakest link in security is ultimately yourselves and your employees. And that's one of the major attack vectors that are being used to compromise organizations these days. So a lot of companies will implement security technology to try and protect you and your employees from doing bad things unintentionally. But these things aren't perfect. And ultimately, that's because you need to get a balance between functionality and security, which is a restriction. So the only way that security is going to work and protect your organization is by every one of your employees proactively understanding what some of these key risks are and how to actually proactively protect themselves and your organization from being breached. So being insecure can leave you exposed, and very simple actions such as clicking on a link or opening up an email attachment or logging into a phishing site can kick off what's a chain reaction of events that can actually lead to major losses for your business, your customers, emotional issues and financial issues for your employees, and even in the worst case, the actual end of your company. And we've seen multiple instances of that in Australia, where there was a major hosting provider that had about 10% of the web hosting in Australia. They got hacked. Within 2 weeks, their entire business had gone bust. So to give you a bit of an insight into how that can happen, it's important to understand some of the financial losses and how that comes into it when you suffer a security breach. So as an example, Target USA had a security breach and they lost over $140 million rising. And the average breach actually costs organizations, and it depends on the industry, but around $5.4 million. And the reason why, there's various studies and there's various numbers that you'll come up against. But basically, the reason why I like this particular one is because it actually caps the number of records breached from between a minimum of 5,000 and a maximum of 100,000, which is actually very, very small. And the importance of that with this particular study is that you don't get major skews either way from very small businesses who have a handful of records and very minimal security through to, the massive organizations like LinkedIn, for example, who suffered a major security breach and they have hundreds of millions of records getting breached. So that gives a range of between $940,000 to $19 million. And you can actually calculate the cost per record, which you can apply to your own organizations. So every single record that gets breached, so personally identifiable information, which can be things like your names, your phone numbers, your email addresses, passwords, credit card numbers, every record of personally identifiable information that gets breached will cost about $188 to your business. So if you multiply that out by the amount of information or the number of records that you have on your customers and your employees, that's where you can estimate your major security breach to cost your business. So it's sometimes quite difficult, especially for small to medium businesses, to understand how a security breach, such as, one of my employees, clicks on a link or runs a malicious email attachment, how that actually adds up to $5.4 million worth of losses. So if you have a look at the chain reaction or the chain of events that happen after that, what we call the entry point, there's things like reputational damage. So if all of your customer details get stolen, they get put on the internet, or they get sold off on the dark web, there gets reputational damage. That then leads to loss of clients and loss of revenue. There's also what's called data breach notification laws these days. They can, in negligent cases, can actually incur fines. With some businesses, there's actually service level agreement fines with their customers if their systems go down. With major organizations, that can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, within minutes or hours of the systems going down. If you have credit card details stolen, then you have to pay for those to be on watch lists. There's compliance fines. So for example, if you have credit cards, for example, you can have PCI fines. You then can have increased regulatory and compliance requirements, increased audits and increased in-depth audits, which then means that you have to then go and potentially employ new people to be able to manage those. You have to perform security breach investigations to actually find out how the hack happened, how they got in, whether any data was stolen, and how to actually prevent it from happening again. You also then have internal resource investigation costs. So when a security breach happens, typically that soaks up your IT team, and that then has your internal costs for those people, but that then also has knock-on effects such as delayed projects, which then means that there's delayed revenue. And again, that adds up to the financial impact. And then you have a whole bunch of different side effects that you don't necessarily take into account. So there was a major security breach that we investigated, and they had 1,000 backup tapes. We had to put those on hold so that we could investigate those, which meant that they then had to go and buy another 1,000 backup tapes at $200 each. And that's a $200,000 impact right there. And then to make sure that you don't get breached, to comply with your compliance requirements, you then have to invest in additional security controls to make sure that you don't get hacked again. You can monitor, for breaches and those sort of things. So when you take that into account, you actually can say, all right, well, looking at all of that, $5.4 million can very easily rack up in losses. So what are the most common ways that organizations are being breached? So the number one way that attackers are actually breaking into organizations these days is actually through stolen passwords. So we actually have, so these happen through third-party security breaches. So these are not your organization suffering a breach. It's all of your online websites that you're going in and creating accounts. So you might have an account in LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, you know, your favorite recipe website. Pretty much every application you use on the internet is storing your password. And unfortunately, pretty much every day or week, these places are getting hacked. All of those usernames and passwords or password hashes are getting stolen. They then either get published on the internet or they get sold off in underground hacking forums. So those third-party security breaches, unfortunately, have, you know, our employees often go and register using their company email account. They use the same password. When that third party gets breached, what the attacker does is just goes and searches for your passwords. They get the password and go and log into your environment. So with COVID, you know, there's been a lot of people introducing remote access to their organizations, but they're not, some of them aren't necessarily taking into account the fact that their passwords might be sitting out on the internet, and being able to use those remote access systems to actually compromise your company's systems and applications. So if you are using VPN services, for example, or remote access services, make sure that you've got two-factor authentication turned on, so that even if the passwords do get leaked, they still can't actually gain access to your organization. So to put it into perspective, you can see the chart on the screen. These are some statistics from our Evolve platform, where we have over 700 billion compromised accounts or leaked passwords that we've collected from over a decade. And just in the last 6 months, we've added over 500 million leaked usernames and passwords that have become available to us, either, you know, just straight off the internet or in the underground hacking forums. So you can see there's massive amounts, millions and millions, every tens of millions or hundreds of millions every single month getting leaked. So I'm going to just do a quick demonstration of how easy it is to find hacked passwords online, and also search passwords in offline password dumps like Evolve. So it's as easy as going to Google, and if you type, so pastebin.com is a website where attackers will go and they'll go hack into an organization, they'll go to Pastebin and they'll just dump all of your data there anonymously. So we can restrict our search to pastebin.com and just search for hacked passwords. And straight away, you can see a whole bunch of references to hacked passwords. So if we open up a couple of these random pages, then you can see this one, hacked passwords, smiley face. This guy's hacked someone, he's just pasted it out on the internet and said, have fun with this guy's account. Basically, this is the person's Chrome saved passwords, and you can see all of their passwords down the right-hand side for each of these websites. So if we go to this next one, this one was hacked by Anonymous, which is one of the big hacking groups. And as you can see down the left-hand side, we've got the passwords, and the right-hand side, we've got their email addresses. And if you scroll through this, you can see a huge number of just usernames and passwords that, or email addresses and passwords that you can just collect on the internet. So if you have a look at the actual scrolling 90% through this list, and that just keeps going on and on and on and on. And that's how, you know, we can, in our Evolve platform, you can actually collect over 700 billion of them. So I'll also show you how to actually search across different breaches. So this is the Evolve platform, and we're just going to do a quick search within our platform for capital1.com. And if we just hit play, within a few seconds, it goes through the 700 billion compromised accounts and actually gives us all of the email addresses and the passwords from different security breaches for this particular organization. And you can see that basically attackers will then grab these, go and find the remote access systems or email, webmail systems, and just go and try and log into those. They might change the numbers to be, 12 to 13 to 14, for example. But it's that easy. So it's important to make sure that you're using things like two-factor authentication, on all of your systems that are exposed to the internet. So what we've seen the second most common attack technique is things like phishing and spearfishing. So you may have heard of phishing, which is the general way of sending out spam that basically tries to trick you to log into, for example, your internet banking and capture your usernames and passwords. Spearfishing is the far more common one these days, where it's very targeted against your organization. So one of the common ones that people get tricked with these days is where they go and get the leaked password and actually send you the password saying, hey, I've compromised your account. As proof, here's your username and password, and then hold you to ransom and basically try and trick you into going in and depositing either some money or Bitcoin into their account. But it's also very targeted. So it can also be, for example, an email from your boss to yourself saying, hey, here's a link, or this attachment is relevant to the project you're working on. Can you have a look at it and get back to me? You go and open up the attachment, and the next thing you know, you've installed malware on your machine. So just some examples, some real-world phishing. So this particular one is, these ones are related to CryptoLocker, which is malware that when it gets installed on your machine, basically encrypts all of your files on your machine and then holds you to ransom. So it's known as ransomware. And you basically, to be able to get those files back, which might be things like, your photos of your kids growing up, or your music and things that you've got, or your work documents. And when you're actually attached to things like you're on your work computer, often you have things like your network drives mapped to your computer. It'll go through all of those as well and encrypt all of your corporate information. And this can then, the more files and the types of files that the malware encrypts, it actually increases the ransom because it becomes more valuable to you to actually pay those. So you can see emails like this where, this one poses as Australia Post. You can see the domain here is aus-post.org, which is not the Australia Post domain. You'll find that all of the phishing emails will have different links in them, trying to convince you to click them, or they'll have attachments. So often if you mouse over these links, you can see that it often goes to a dodgy looking domain or something that's not Australia Post, for example. Another, even unsubscribed links, can be quite, can be used to try and trick you into unsubscribing from some spam, and then suddenly you're starting to download some malware. Another indicator for spotting these types of scams is when they're trying to get you to pay some money. It's quite often that they include the currency because they're trying to use some of these attacks, not just necessarily in your local area, but also potentially internationally. So you'll find that the currency in there, and they sometimes don't write the numbers in the same format as us. So you can see 516 in Australia, we wouldn't usually put the comma there. So these are all small indicators that, it's not a trustworthy email. So this is another one from Energy Australia. This one looks a little bit more legitimate. There's no currency and things on this one, but you can see that this particular one doesn't have your name on it. So usually if you're getting a bill, you're almost certainly going to get your name on there. So that's just another indicator. Again, there's a link in the email for you to go and view your bill details. One of my favorite ones is this one, which is from the AFP, which is a traffic infringement notice saying that you've been doing negligent driving. And to click this link to have a look at your infringement notice, you receive the email, you say to yourself, yes, I've been driving around like a maniac lately. You know, I'm going to click on it to download my infringement notice. That takes you to a fake AFP website, for example, and you get a pop-up box here saying to download your infringement notice, which is what you expected. You click OK, you download it, you open it, and you run it. And suddenly it installs the crypto locker or the ransomware. It encrypts all of your files, and you get a message up saying that all of your files have been encrypted. And in this case, it's asking for $100 US to decrypt your files. Most of the time, you'll find that if you do pay the ransom, they will actually decrypt your files because, oddly enough, they don't want to get a bad reputation for not decrypting your files, because to them it's a business. They don't want people to think that if they pay them money, they're not going to get their files back. With COVID-19, as that sort of progressed, there's been a lot of scams coming out, you know, around coronavirus or COVID, emails or SMSs trying to convince people to hand over money. So from ScamWatch, there was 2,700 COVID-19 scam reports that have had over $1.1 million in reported losses just in the last few months. So there's a lot of people falling for this. You know, they can look quite legitimate. So if you look at the email on the right-hand side, you can see that it's an email from the Australian government, and it's got an attachment here. So if you actually open that attachment, it's actually malicious, and I'll show you that in a second. But it's also quite common these days to get them via SMS. So you can see here things from MyGov, for example. So whether you're getting a rebate, for example, or a refund, or, you know, information about COVID, you know, a lot of people will actually click on these, and that might then trick you into potentially entering in your MyGov credentials. It might be to download a malicious app on your phone, you know, those sort of things. So you just have to be very, very suspicious about those. With that previous email, with the attachment, if you actually uploaded that to VirusTotal.com. So VirusTotal is a multi-engine antivirus scanner. So there's a whole bunch. I think there's about 50, so on this screenshot it says 59 different antivirus scanners. So you upload a file, it'll actually scan it through all of them, and you can see that there's a large portion of these that's actually picked it up as a Trojan, which is a malicious, basically a piece of malware to remotely access your machine. The other thing you can do with, so obviously that's bad and you shouldn't open it. The other thing that you can do with VirusTotal is actually provide it with a URL. So if you copy a URL out of your phishing email, you can actually go to VirusTotal and paste it in. It'll go and analyze the link for you and give you a risk score associated with that. So before you actually click on it, you can actually check if it's legitimate or not. So how to protect yourself? So is it potentially suspicious or untrustworthy websites? So they're quite commonly things like, you know, porn sites, or it might be things like torrent sites that Australia is famous for. You know, those websites, not surprisingly, are not run by trustworthy people, and they quite often will actually be serving up malware and exploits that'll be designed to try and compromise your system. You want to keep your system and software up to date, and that includes everything from your operating system and your web browsers to your email clients. Making sure that they're up to date means that you're minimizing the number of vulnerabilities that actually exist in your laptop, which attackers can actually use to actually break into your system. Run antivirus software as a baseline protection. Antivirus software is absolutely not a foolproof solution to prevent you from being breached. It is just a baseline protection. So our company gets engaged to break into organizations to test out their security. Antivirus has never stopped us from getting in. It has flagged alerts and prevented, maybe the first or second attempt to break in. But then we basically just go and tune our attacks to bypass the antivirus, and then we can compromise your environment. So it's absolutely necessary, but you can't rely on it 100%. And that's why you need to make sure that you're proactively looking for some of these suspicious links or suspicious attachments, having a look at the attachment extensions and making sure that they're not executables rather than a PDF, for example. So obviously don't click on those. Within your organization, if you do notice something suspicious, so you receive a suspicious email, maybe it's a spearfishing email, please forward it on to your IT team for them to have a look at. If you have actually clicked on a link or opened a malicious attachment, or you've gone to a phishing site and you've entered in your credentials, you're going to feel extremely embarrassed. But it is really, really important that you let your IT team know that, that this has happened, because they can go and put in controls to stop other employees receiving the email or clicking on the link or running the malicious attachment. And that is far better to feel embarrassed by telling them that you've done it than to be the one that causes $5.4 million worth of losses to the business. One of the things that attackers do, well, once they've got your credentials, they'll actually go and log into things like your email accounts, and they'll search for words like password, and they'll go and get other usernames, passwords, sensitive information, confidential documents that you're emailing around to each other. Make sure that you're not doing that. You're using file servers, for example, to transfer files. Don't be emailing around usernames and passwords. Worst case, just SMS the passwords separately. That's not even foolproof these days. You can call them up and tell it to them over the phone. Don't use the same password across all of your different systems. There's software called password managers. Some of the examples here are KeyPass, Dashlane, and 1Password. And that lets you generate passwords that are different for every single website that you use, and you don't have to remember any of them. So it makes it very safe and very easy to use. Don't keep sensitive or confidential information in your inbox, your sent mail, or your archives, and make sure that all of your corporate information is not being stored on personal devices. So when you've got corporate laptops, for example, they often have security built into them, and they're being monitored by the IT teams. As soon as you move that information onto personal devices, that ability to track malicious activity and who's accessing the files suddenly disappears. So make sure that you minimize that wherever possible. So I hope everyone found that useful. More than happy to then jump into questions that anyone has. And thanks very much for attending.
Thanks, Damien. Sorry, Ty. So thank you very much, Ty. I'd love to invite, both also Damien and Stephenie to, we can have a quick discussion. And to everybody in our joining in as an attendee, if you do have any questions for Ty, please do either pop it into the Q&A box, or feel free to raise your hand and feel free to ask a question directly to our panelists. So if I could ask Damien and Stephenie, and if you'd like as well, Ty, depending on your bandwidth, if you'd like to hop on video as well, we can have a bit of a conversation. But I mean, while everybody's getting together, I mean, would you like to share a bit more about what you do, Ty? What threat intelligence does?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so Threat Intelligence is a specialist security company, as I mentioned, based primarily in Australia. So we do things like, we've basically got a team of top-notch penetration testers or professional hackers. And, we don't just hire anyone. Ultimately, the whole purpose of our business is to pull together not just guys who are recognized in Australia, but also around the world. So a lot of our guys will run training at Black Hat, do presentations at Black Hat, as well as some of the hacking conferences in Latin America, the US, obviously, Asia Pacific, and including Australia, as well as over in Europe as well. So we run our training over at Black Hat Europe as well as the US, and run training at another conference called Hack in the Box in Malaysia, as well as the Australian one, which is called RuxCon. So basically, yeah, our team is a specialist team of security experts, and that covers a whole range of areas in security, everything from application security and infrastructure security to cloud security, security architectures, through to security automation through our Evolve platform that we offer.
Great, thanks. So we do actually have one question from YouTube, and it was from David Hill. So he asks, it's so hard to remember all those passwords. What is a practical way to manage this? Now, I know you've already mentioned, using password managers, but I mean, say a lot of those do carry costs. Are there any other options that you'd recommend in terms of, either keeping track of passwords, or, or do you have another option for that?
Look, to be honest, I mean, you can go down the password complexity route, but, that's still, those passwords, if they're getting breached and they're getting stored in clear text, in third-party systems, and you have to remember that a lot of these places are not being run by, mature security organizations. They're being run by organizations whose main purpose is not security. So they don't necessarily have the same sort of controls. So even some of the most complex passwords that you have are still getting stored insecurely out on the internet, and they can be breached. So unfortunately, the only way really to prevent third-party breaches from being able to be reused is ultimately to use a password manager software. There are free ones out there. So KeePass, which I mentioned, is free. Obviously free tends to be less usable or less feature rich. But there are often alternatives. With some of the commercial ones, they sometimes offer free personal accounts in the hope that you'll introduce that to your organization. But yeah, ultimately you want to have different passwords for every single account that you've got, and they really make it very easy. The other thing that you can do is make sure that you're not registering for third-party applications with your corporate email account. Make sure that you're using your own personal one, so it can't be linked back to your organization.
Thanks. And I'm assuming a lot of these use some sort of subscription base in terms of cost-wise for password managers, and so it's usually like a yearly cost of about $20 or $30. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you're looking at probably about between $3 to $5 a month.
And so, thinking back on some of our clients, especially our NGO providers, who are typically the targets of cyber attacks? I mean, I'm kind of thinking of more vulnerable clients as opposed to some of our clients who may have a bit more money, as opposed to some of our more vulnerable clients. I mean, who'd be the typical targets in this sense?
Yeah, look, a lot of targets, ultimately attackers go after the weakest link, and that tends to be small to medium businesses where they don't have the security controls in place, they don't have the people in place to be able to monitor for the attacks. They also tend to be stepping stones that attackers can use to then gain access to larger organizations. So if you breach, a small IT provider and they're doing managing the desktops and things for an enterprise, for example, you can then leverage that, break into the small guy, leverage that trust relationship between the organizations to then obviously then gain access to the enterprise and also government departments.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. And Steph, you looked like you were about to say something earlier before I rudely jumped in.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Ty, I was hoping you might be able to speak a bit further to accessing different platforms through a partner organization. So for example, logging into your Instagram via Facebook and vice versa. Do you have any sort of hygiene tips around that?
Look, I think the main thing with a lot of those things are set up relatively securely, but what you need to just keep in mind is that you are allowing them to access the information. So you've got to be careful, make sure that when you're authorizing the third-party application to access, for example, your Facebook information or your Google or your Microsoft details, have a look at what they're actually requesting. Sometimes it's not overly clear because they can obviously use that information. The other thing that you need to be aware of is that if you have that trust relationship where you can log into, for example, anything with your Facebook account, if your Facebook account gets breached, then you can start logging into every other application that you've got without having to know the passwords associated with it.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So we've got a couple of questions from our Q&A. So our first question comes from Stephenie Adam, who asked, Ty, you mentioned that antivirus is very basic protection. What is a more sophisticated approach, particularly for small not-for-profit organizations with limited budgets, for IT experts and even for personal home computers and internet use?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So look, antivirus is a very good start. For more mature organizations who really want to lock down their systems, the number one way that even the ASD or the government recommend is called application whitelisting. And that's where you basically lock down your computer and say, only these programs are allowed to run on my computer, right? And that means that even if you download malware and you try and run it, it'll actually stop it from running. So that's got the benefit of being highly secure. It's got the downside of being a bit of an operational overhead to manage that. So if you have a new program that you want to download and run, obviously you then have to go and allow that in your application whitelisting program. So it can become a bit tedious to manage. It's more secure, and that's where the balance between functionality and security comes in, where you really need to get that right, where you're not losing more money through operational impacts by not being able to work as you are through the actual cyber attacks. So just getting that balance is important.
Great, thanks. And we've got a second question that I think is a really pertinent question for a lot of our audience members, which is from Anonymous. Unfortunately, probably not the famous hacker group, but Anonymous attendee asks, if an organization's client data may have been breached, who are the people that we need to report this to?
Okay, so there's the OAIC, who you can do your mandatory data breach notifications to. And there's a form on their website that you can fill in to basically let the government know about the attack, and that helps them to also gather intelligence about what attacks are going on across Australia and be able to give advice that's happening. Don't feel scared about telling them that it's been breached. They're there to help. But then, yeah, you've got, from a recovery perspective and really doing an analysis, there's obviously security companies like ours going to a security breach investigation. So literally just before this call, we had a previous client ring up and said that they had been hacked and have asked us to do an urgent incident response engagement to go and identify how the attacker got in, what data was stolen, and whether the attacker had infiltrated any other systems in the environment. So you typically then need to get security experts to go and have a look at that.
Awesome. And thank you very much for that, Ty. And some great starts, especially given that, you know, the relationship with a lot of our NGO providers with the funding providers, which are most oftentimes government. I mean, having the start to knowing where to contact is vital, especially. So I mean, we've only got about a couple of minutes left. So I mean, if we don't get into all the questions, because we've got another couple questions from the audience members. You know, we will save a lot of these questions, and we might send them across to you if you don't mind having some time to fill those out and passing, and we can send that back off to our attendees for today. Well, we'll probably answer one more question before we bring on our next speaker. But so this is again from anonymous attendee. Is there somewhere to access a summary of the information shared today? So yes, if you don't mind, we'll share your PowerPoint with our attendees today.
Yep.
And also a final question from Anita Hanna, which was from, are resources and supports available to NFPs to help clean up and recover?
I might let you and Steph answer that actually.
Yeah, so I can speak a bit to that. So the New South Wales Cybersecurity Node, we are here to assist businesses as it comes to offering resources. And even on the call today, we're going to be walking away and sending all of the attendees some tangible assets that they can have in their hand to refer to. And you're very welcome to reach out to me at any time and I can direct you appropriately. And I just want to abuse while I'm chatting for a second, just to say that I found this session really informative. I've sat on so many of these, but even the bit around pastebin.com, I mean, Ty had no visibility into any of that. And it's pretty scary, but it was also pretty neat. And I think from my perspective, just actually seeing how accessible your own data is online, it just really underscores the urgency of this topic. And you've given us some really fantastic little bits as to how to go about the next step.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stephenie, and thank you very much, Ty. So I'd like to talk, before we wrap up for today, I'd love to introduce you guys to Adam Fish. So Adam is a part of the Commonwealth Bank's cyber outreach team, which has responsibility for a number of exciting work streams, including cyber advocacy, cyber skills development, ecosystem capability building, and staff and community awareness. The cyber outreach team aims to positively shape the digital environment to support safer online experiences for people, businesses, and communities. So I'd love to bring Adam to the stage, and we've also got Adam Smallhorn as well. So both of them work for the Commonwealth Bank Commonwealth Bank Cyber Outreach team, and honestly produced one of the most excellent guides so far that I've read, which is the Damn Good Guide to Cybersecurity by the Commonwealth Bank. So if both Adam Fish and Adam Smallhorn would like to join us, and you know, you guys have the stage to kind of quickly talk through about what you guys do, and you know, how us as NGOs can hopefully tap into your support.
Hi there. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Super. You never know with technology. First of all, thanks very much for having me and my colleague Adam Smallhorn on. And as Stephenie said, Ty's talk super interesting, particularly the case studies and particularly all the stuff around the recent COVID scams. Super interesting. Although I definitely can't compete, I don't feel, with my beard game. Ty's is far superior. I thought the last question at the end was a really neat segue into a couple of things that we're going to try and just talk to in the couple of minutes that we have. I believe both of these resources have already been shared with the forum, and they'll be available for all participants afterwards. The first is a document that we produced along with an organisation called Our Community. It's called The Damn Good Guide to Cybersecurity, and it's specifically designed for not-for-profits. It's a really good document for providing some structure and governance and answers to a lot of questions, quite sort of intricate questions. But what I really like about it is that at the back end, there's a whole series of templates for organizations to help craft some of the paperwork that goes behind having a cybersecurity posture, like the policies and all the other various bits and pieces that you find that you need along your cybersecurity journey. It provides an overview to quite a lot of different issues, but it is a really good resource, and we've had some really good feedback over the last 12 to 18 months from all different types of not-for-profit organizations, just about how useful it really is. So it's there for everybody to use, and it's our absolute pleasure to share it with you as well. I think the other main benefit is that it talks a lot about some of the things that Ty was talking about, like passwords and mentality and culture and changing culture within organizations. And it's our hope that this document helps to promote some really good conversations within organizations to change culture to be more cyber aware. The other resource that we're very happy to share with everybody on the call is it's an e-learning module called Cool, Calm and Connected. It's actually based on the Commonwealth Bank's original internal cyber awareness training. It forms 6 modules that cover a range of topics, including password security, email payment fraud, and helps to re-emphasize some of the things that Ty was talking about in terms of how people should approach cybersecurity within the organization. These modules are free to download, and they can be accessed and provisioned from the Commonwealth Bank website. I think if you type it into your favorite search engine, I think you're looking for Commonwealth Bank Secure. Combank Secure, that's what it's called. I should have been able to roll that off the tip of my tongue. But it's also a really good, helpful set of modules that organizations can use to roll out. And again, a number of organizations, whether it's in the government sector or not-for-profit sector, or even just small businesses, have found that they've been able to roll it out to their staff members and help promote cultural change and cyber awareness throughout their organizations. So you have two great resources that we love to provide at absolutely no cost. It's very much our firm belief that the bank and the economy is only as safe as everybody else is in the economy, and particularly businesses like yourselves and organizations like yourselves, and therefore both of those resources are absolutely free to use. Happy to field any other questions that you have when you're using those resources, or that you may come across when you're using those resources through this forum or through Stephenie and her colleagues. And that's really all I've got to say on those 2 pieces of content.
Thank you very much, Adam. And just checking in if your colleague Adam would like to kind of say a few words as well. Feel free to join. But we do have a couple minutes just before, and we've actually got a last-minute question from our YouTube audience, which is from Teresa Pun. So, as a small business, if I get attacked, who do I go to seek help? While there is police for physical break-ins, what is there in place for cyber break-ins? And feel free to either Ty or Adam, feel free to jump on to the question.
I'm going to defer to Ty and to Stephenie, I think, on this one.
So there's the OAIC site that you can Google, and it's a government site where you can report your data breaches. There's obviously the New South Wales Cyber Node that can guide you in the right direction. And obviously, if you do need specialist security help, then contacting a security specialist security company like ourselves, obviously, that can give you a hand.
100%. There's not much to add to that. Ty's right in the money with all of that. I'm very happy to direct anybody to potential companies such as Ty Threat Intelligence that does work in this space, or if they're needing to talk to a government agency about reporting a breach. I'm happy to field those kinds of calls. That's what I'm here to do.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. So before we wrap up, what I'm going to quickly do is ask if everybody can jump back onto menti.com. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen with the code. And so if all our attendees can quickly hop onto menti.com and just answer one extra question. So the code is 279629. So you notice it's kind of almost exactly the same as the first question. And now that's by design. And that design was to hopefully see if your ideas on, scams and phishing and spearfishing has changed over the past, 55 minutes that we've had together. And this is just to gauge, how we're feeling now. Are we feeling more scared, less scared? It's yeah. But I'll leave this. I'll probably just leave you guys with this. But our next session is next Thursday. We'll be sending out invitations soon once again. So please feel free to please register. And again, we'll be in the same place, all probably within our own homes again, and sharing this information with you. And so, but our next session, if I'm correct, is we'll focus down more on phishing and the issues surrounding that. So my name has been Charlton, and I'd like to also thank our panelists for today, Ty, and as well as Stephenie and Adam. And so if in the meantime, if you do have any questions moving forward, please do feel free to send us more questions, or if you guys have anything more more particular to talk about, more than happy to make that one of our another one of our lunchtime conversations. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll probably leave it there for today, and have a great, wonderful rest of the week. Thank you, everybody.